All right, what is the distributive property? Now, the distributive property is something that you can use when you have only numbers. It's also something that we can use, and we will definitely use, when we start working with algebra and working with variables. But in this video, we're just going to focus on using it when it's all numbers, no variables. Okay, we're going to start with the distributive property of multiplication. Let's look at an example. Here we have 2 times, you'd say this as 2 times the quantity of, and that means that I'm about to say everything that's inside parentheses, 2 times the quantity of 4 plus 5. Okay, but how do we do that? So, if you don't have any variables, one option is to say, well, follow order of operations. Inside my parentheses, 4 plus 5 is 9. 2 times 9 is 18. Okay, so we know that's how our answer should look. It should be 18. But sometimes you aren't being asked about what the answer is. Sometimes you're being asked about how does the property work? This property of the distributive property of multiplication. How does that work? Well, what it's really doing is it's distributing times 2 to everything inside my parentheses. What's distributing mean? To distribute something is to give it out equally. So what I'm really doing is I'm giving times 2 equally to every term in here. Okay, well, how do I do that? Sometimes you'll see little arrows that say don't forget to do 2 times 4 and don't forget to do 2 times 5, but I have a different strategy that I want us to try. Mine involves some boxes. I'm going to break this up and pretend that this is a box. I'll redraw it so it's nicer. Here's my box. It's so great. On one side, I'm going to write 2, because this 2 is what's outside of my box. On the top of my box, I'm going to write 4 and plus 5. Now, this 4 plus 5 has 2 terms in it, 2 things going on. So I'm going to cut my box into 2 sections. And then I'm just going to multiply like this is an area model. Well, if I look at the area of 2 by 4, 2 times 4 is 8. Okay, cool, I know that. Now I'm going to look, if this side is 2, then this side and this side are also 2. So this box right here is going to represent 2 times positive 5. We haven't dealt with integers yet this year, but sometimes it'll be times negative or times minus. So we just want to keep that sign with our work. So 2 times positive 5, or just like a regular 5, would be 10, which is positive. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, what's the total area of my box? Well, 8 plus 10, that would be the total area of my box. 8 plus 10 is 18. Hey, that's what we said when we solved it the order of operations way. 2 times 9, yep, that's 18. Okay, so both ways work. Now, why would you want to do it this box way when you could solve it the order of operations way? Well, for questions like this. Sometimes questions are less about what's the answer and more about, do you know the right way to set up this kind of problem? Now, when I see problems like this, I get a little overwhelmed. Like, whoa, that's a lot of numbers and a lot of operations, and oh my gosh, what's going on? So I'm going to quickly look at the problem, see if there's something that I can do off to the side to solve it to make this easier. Now, what I notice right away is that all the answer choices on the left side of the equal sign are all equivalent. I'm dealing with 8 times 5 plus 3. And the question is really asking me, hey, look at the right-hand side and tell me which is the right way to write that. One way you can solve this, it takes a really long time, but you could just start solving following order of operations. But the problem is that sometimes you might get 2 answers that are correct. Because what this question is really asking is, what's the right way to write this problem? So this is where the box method comes in handy. Let's try it. I'm going to leave everything else behind, and I'm just going to go on my own piece of blank paper and solve this problem. So I'm going to draw my box. 8 is outside. You can kind of think of the parentheses as the start of your box. 8 is outside your box. There's 5 and there's plus 3. Those are two different terms. 5 and plus 3. So I'm going to cut my box in half so I can deal with each of them separately. Now, if I were just trying to find the answer, what I would do is multiply, like I'm finding the area of each of these parts of the box, and add them together, or subtract them depending on the sign. But today I'm going to add an extra little step in here. How do you find the area of this first box? Well, you multiply 8 times 5. That's going to give us 40. Okay, cool. How do you find the area of the next box? Well, you multiply 8 times positive 3. Now, since it's positive, I don't need the positive sign. I can just say 8 times 3. But I do like to keep the positive sign because it helps me remember what I'm supposed to do between the two boxes. So I would add, if I were finding my answer, add 40 plus 24 to get that the quantity of 8 times the quantity of 5 plus 3 equals 64. But that's not what I was asking me. It's asking me, what's the right way to write this? I have these two multiplication problems. I know that they're going to be added together. Let's go back and look at our examples. This first one is 8 times 5. Yes, that's what I need to do. But then nothing happened to the 3. We multiplied that 3 times 8, so this is clearly not the right choice. The second option, nothing happens to the 8. The 5 and the 3 get multiplied. We don't multiply the two sides of our box. We're multiplying them with the other side, not with each other. That's not right. Here we go. 8 times 5. Yep, we did that. That gave us our 40. 3 times 8. Isn't 3 times 8 the same thing as 8 times 3? Well, let's check it. 3 times 8, that's 24. Just like 8 times 3 is 24. That is equivalent. So this last option would be the correct way to write it. Let's practice just one or two more so we get in the hang of it, and then we'll practice independently. What if our box had more than 2 terms? That's okay. We draw our box. Whatever we're distributing throughout, whatever's outside our parentheses, goes on probably the shorter side of your box. And then the terms inside the parentheses, what you're distributing your multiplication to, go on top. We have 9, we have plus 3, we have plus 7. Okay, 3 terms. That means I'm going to make 3 sections of my box. Cool. The first section, I'd find the area by saying 12 times 9. The second section, I'd find the area by saying 12 times 3. It's a positive, so I'm going to add them together. The third section, I'd find the area by saying 12 times 7. Since 7 is also positive, I'm going to add those together. So the way that I could write this as a longer multiplication sentence that clearly shows that I am distributing that times 12 throughout the problem. Now, you don't have to write the parentheses around each of the little multiplication bits because order of operations says that we would do the multiplication first. But this is how it's probably going to be written out if you saw it on a question that was asking about the right way to write the distributive property. So let's look at one more example and then we'll be done. Okay, looks a little bit different. Not the way it would normally appear. If you were writing it, we'd probably prefer that you wrote it like this. However, the quantity of 12 plus 9 times 2, with your 2 in the back at the right on the end, still a multiplication problem you use the distributive property for. So we're just going to practice and model it just in case you see something like that. I can put my 2 on this side of the box. That still works for me. 12, positive 9 plus 9, 2 terms. I'm going to cut my box into 2 sections. Well, the area of my first box would be 12 times 2, or 2 times 12, because we don't need to worry about order when it's all multiplication. And the area of my second box would be positive 9 times 2, or 2 times positive 9. Notice I don't need the plus sign if I don't want it when it's positives. And since they are positives, I can add them together. I'm not worried about negatives right now. We'll worry about that when we talk about integers. So I could write this as 2 times 12 plus 2 times 9 equals the quantity of 12 plus 9 times 2. If you're actually looking for an answer, you would say, well, 12 times 2 is 6, and 2 times 9 is 18, and I add them together, and then you could write your final answer. Depending on the question, you'll either be writing an answer or you'll be writing how to write the problem as a multiplication sentence.